Hello ladies, I'm Mrs. Sherman and welcome to Homemaking Radio. This is something I've designed for you to hear and to listen to as you go about your work and the home. And as many more people are home now, this is even so much more important that they get up and get around and get busy and care for the home and create an atmosphere for yourself and for your family. And so today I have a lot to talk about. But first, I'm going to show you my teacup, and it's kind of a gold color, and I believe I got this a couple years ago at Home Goods, and it's by Grace's China. And one of the things I love about this china is it has a nice big handle. It also says that it is dishwasher safe. And I never put it in the dishwasher because I know that eventually it will wear off the pattern if I use it a lot. But it's kind of nice because if I ever have a crowd here, it doesn't take me 3 days to wash all those dishes. So I love this cup. I love the color, and I especially like the outside of the cup, that beautiful light. It's not a lemon. It's a wonderful yellow, but it's rather muted. I really like it. And so I hope you are drinking tea all day long. In these times, it's so important. Most of us have huge stashes of tea because we've tried everything. But if you don't have tea bags and tea, you can just make your own. Put a little cinnamon in some water with some orange, a little bit of orange juice or something like that. Put some frozen berries in a cup, or just make your own tea out of herbs like mint. And you can just make it from things that you have and drink it out of a nice cup. Treat yourself nice. Give yourself some dignity. And that is why I always begin this class with telling you to get ready. If you and your family have not had their showers, have not bathed, have not done their hair and gotten dressed in fresh clothing that has been pressed and has not taken care of their appearance, please go and do that now. That is so important for facing the day together and how to develop respect for one another also, and also compliment one another when they have come out of the bathroom and they're getting ready to begin their day. Compliment them and how nice they look or how nice they smell, and also encourage them. Start their training now. Start teaching them to what kind of bathroom would you like to go into, and make them leave it clean and neat and tidy and sanitary for the next person. Think about what the next person is going to see. And also, you can have them pretend that they are keepers of a hotel or a motel and tell them how to clean, so that the next guest will have a clean and sanitary bathroom. There's so much you can do with your children at home. If you don't have children, I will go on to being alone in just a minute, but if you have children, you have to start slowly with teaching them. You don't just hit it with, you don't just start teaching them with a bang. Start with the things you're already doing, like getting up in the morning and eating. You can start with appearance and manners. Those two things, appearance, manners, care of the home, respect for your own home, respect for other people's things, respect for yourself. You can start with that. And so I've got several things to talk to you about, and I want you to go and do your work. So I don't want you to stay here and look at me, but I do have a book I want to talk about, and it's pleasant. I'm trying to leave you feeling as pleasant as possible. If I do get into a little bit of politics, I'll warn you, and you can turn it off. This is called The Perfect Afternoon Tea Book, a collection of tea time treats. There is no author, but it says on the inside that it's by a group, by a company called Lorenz Books, Lorenz Books. Of course, I will try to remember to put pictures of it on my blog. But what I liked about this, I got it at a store somewhere back in, it's printed in 1995. You know, there are a lot of good things came out in the 80s and 90s as far as printing was beautiful in those days. And it has a lot of beautiful pictures in here that I really enjoy. That's pretty, isn't it? And cinnamon apple gâteau and rich chocolate cake. I don't eat chocolate, but I like to look at pictures. And I have a friend who just likes cookbooks for when she sits down to read. That's her reading material. She just has a pile of cookbooks, and people give her new cooking magazines and cookbooks because that's her reading. That's what she does. She doesn't necessarily cook them all, but she likes to read about them. And that's one of the things about Cook's Country or Cook's County, whatever it's called. It's a magazine that you get, and they talk about the food in a dramatic way. I've read some of them to you in some of the previous videos. Now, I would like to read the introduction to this, so you may go to work. I don't think I have anything else to show you, but tomorrow, Lord willing, and the creek don't rise, I am going to show you some drawing books for you and for children, and how you can all be art literate. And you'll really enjoy that. So, introduction to the Perfect Afternoon Tea book. I always liked the cover on this because I was always looking for that teapot, and those two teacups never did find them. But sometimes you would see a one of a kind in a magazine or a book. So, ladies, go ahead if you've got something to fold, if you've got some laundry to put in, if you've got dishes to do, if you've got the kitchen to clean up. That's the hardest thing for me. I really need something to listen to while I am cleaning the kitchen. And I never listen to myself. I don't replay these. I don't know what mistakes I've made, and I never edit anything. So if you were sitting right across from me, I would not be able to edit anything. You would just have to overlook some of the things that I said if they weren't quite on track, and just realize it's part of my personality. And so, and I would overlook you too, but we would enjoy being together. And so, if you've got something to do, now what I do is I listen to Wives and Daughters, and there are, I believe, 6 episodes of Wives and Daughters, and with Justine Waddell and I forget who else, but I like to quote out of them. And my favorites, I like Dr. Gibson. I think of all the favorite characters as I like Dr. Gibson. And some of you probably have your favorites like Molly or Cynthia. And so anyway, I listen to that while I am, and I listen to it on a DVD, which I don't look at. I just put it on and play it and do all my dishes and get everything loaded, unloaded, and the floor swept and everything. It's just like wonderful company. It's so pleasant. So I'm going to read to you. So if you've got something to clean, maybe you want to clean the bathroom, go get a bedroom cleaned up, change the sheets, make the beds, sweep. And these days people don't really use the vacuums much anymore, so you don't have that noise. You can just sweep. As a matter of fact, I've got one last carpet in one last bedroom that didn't get removed and replaced with a wood floor, and I go ahead and just use the broom on it. I don't get a vacuum cleaner out anymore for something like that. And I have just the sweeping and many other things to do. If I have staged this area that I'm sitting in, because I have a bunch of sewing out here, and I have a bunch of ironing over there, and I have, things out. So I know what it's like to stage a scene, and that's one of the things I'll talk to you about someday. So, introduction. Most of us don't often have time to pause in our busy lives and enjoy taking tea. So, on the special days when we do this, this charming meal can be a particular treat. The very words afternoon tea are evocative of vacations and weekends, tea on the lawn during a long, leisurely summer's day in the garden. I have to interrupt to tell you a memory, because I think if I can tell a memory, if it comes to my mind, it's probably going to, I'll be able to keep it. And we lived in Tasmania when I was 16, and I met another girl who was 16, and she and her family had a summer home at Crayfish Creek near where we lived. We lived in Carey Point, and she invited my sister and I there for, I believe we may have even spent the night, but in the morning we had a tea, and it was honey on bread and butter or something like that. It was just the most delightful experience, and of course they had a beautiful scene outside their window of the ocean. We were all on the ocean. And so when it said evocative of vacations and weekends, tea on the lawn during a long leisurely summer's day in the garden, or by the fire after a frosty winter talk, when there is nothing more welcoming than the aroma of freshly baked scones — we say scones in America, you say scones other places — or hot buttered toast. Tea time is a relaxing, sociable event that everyone looks forward to hungrily, and it's especially satisfying to pamper your family and friends by providing homemade treats to make it a memorable occasion. Afternoon tea is a flexible meal. A plate of tiny sandwiches or pretty cookies to accompany a pot of delicately flavored China tea may be all that is needed, but if you've worked up a hearty appetite after a day's gardening, some strenuous sport, or a long walk, tea might feature more substantial fare. Hard-cooked or scrambled eggs, perhaps savory pâtés or slices of home-baked meat with spicy chutneys are traditional elements of an old-fashioned high tea. With lots of fresh crusty bread and jam, a rich chocolate cake, or a fruit tart, this kind of tea does more than fill the hungry gap between lunch and supper. It's quite capable of replacing one or the other of those meals altogether. If you have a large family or if you have little children and they seem to be especially cranky and hungry towards dinner time, I would really suggest at 4 o'clock, feed them then. My father did that too. He told my mother, feed them at 4 o'clock, don't wait for me to get home, because it was easier and was not as stressful, because their stomachs needed to be filled sooner and more often. So just give them something at 4 o'clock, and then you can have a less stressful dinner, and it can be lighter fare. Maybe they only need one serving of everything. So ever since the drinking of tea began, it has been surrounded by ceremony and formality, and this tradition is just as enjoyable today. Set the scene for an elegant tea with a sparkling tablecloth and cloth napkins, and use your best and prettiest cups and saucers. It really is true that tea tastes better when it's drunk from a fine china cup. True. Try to use leaf tea rather than tea bags, and brew it with care so that it is truly delicious and refreshing. If you are making sandwiches, make sure the fillings look as irresistible as they will taste. Remove the crusts and cut them small so that everyone has room for more. I don't remove the crusts. Our bread is so soft that the crusts are not a problem. Fresh, still warm scones and muffins are perfect vehicles for your own homemade jams and jellies, delicious with fresh sweet cream butter. For summer teas in the garden, infuse the food with the scent of flowers. Rose petals and lavender will add magic to preserves, cookies, cakes, and they taste wonderful accompanied by a subtly perfumed tea such as Earl Grey or Rose Pao Chang. For a really original and highly romantic effect, try heart-shaped rose petal sandwiches. If you are planning a grand tea party, this book will provide all the suggestions you need to make your table groan with mouth-watering delights. But even if you don't relish the idea of baking on such a scale, any one of the delicious ideas in this book would make a simple tea time special. All of the recipes are clearly presented and even to follow. Everyone loves the welcoming smell of baking. Satisfied smiles around the tea table are guaranteed and will amply reward your efforts. Now, what I liked about this is it actually showed, what to do. It actually showed a cook mixing things, and then there's some step-by-step procedures here too. I don't know how much this costs now because it was written in the 1990s, but it was $12 back in the day, back in the olden days. And so I would really recommend this and you can put these on your coffee table or in your dining room area or in your kitchen. Have a little kitchen stack of little kitchen books to look at that have cute little end, what do you call them? I've forgotten what they're called. Bookends and things to look at like that. The other thing that I got that I found when I was going through my archive books was the Home Comforts, and I will read at another time. Now this is it's like a college level, look at the writing, it's a college level book. It was written by a woman who used to be a lawyer. She really did her research, and she says homemaking is harder than working outside the home. And she has done her research, and I would like to read her part about making the bed and choosing bed linens, maybe in a future video. But you need to have this just as a reference book in your library if you want. They're not expensive anymore, but they used to be. Oh my goodness, these things used to be over $30, and now they're like $3.99. So that's a good thing. I have a lot to talk to you about, and I told you about appearance. We want to go into the home now. The beauty of home life and being home now is that after your family sees what you are doing and how you're making a list and you're trying to follow this list, and in this list I just follow 3 things. I do appearance and then homemaking, and then in the end I talk about knowledge and wisdom and understanding in dealing with things and people. I'm sorry I keep shaking this. I keep kicking it. It's a very, very wobbly table, but I like it because of its height. And so when they get used to seeing what you do all day as a mother, a wife, and a homemaker, the beauty of what's going on now, because so many of you are home, is never again will a man or children ask what you do all day long. Never again will anyone run down or demean the woman at home, because she's monitoring everything. She's guiding the home. She's guarding the home. They see it in action now. And that is one of the things I discovered about home education, is the children watch every move you make. And they know what you're up to. They know what you do. They know how busy you are. They know you're not just, sitting around waiting for something to happen. You create things to happen. Just like that tea that I read to you. You're creating events for your children. And please do not sit around. None of you. Don't let anybody sit around and wait for things to be over. Wait for things to happen. Wait for the world to behave itself. Don't wait for that. Create a life for yourself, because every moment, every year, it can't be recovered. And so this might be a fun time to keep a journal, to keep a scrapbook, and start recording some of the things you did. Now, I just talked to a lady I've known for many years, and she told me, her children are teenagers, and she told me that every evening now they have a teaching session, and everyone has to come prepared to teach something. I think it's brilliant. And they teach about maybe a country or a state, and they learn about it, and then they come and give you a lesson. And so, because now you see, like the Bible says, whereas some of you ought to be teachers by now, so now this wise mother realizes her children ought to be teachers by now. They've read enough, and they're teachers, and they teach on all kinds. They get to choose whatever subject they want and teach on all kinds of things, and even her husband participates. And he tells about places that he has worked and how it works and how this industry works and where it came from and what his work was. I just think it's wonderful. And one of the things that she wanted to know, did I have any ideas? She had a list of what all her children were teaching. She said she hadn't decided what she was teaching, and I said, why don't you teach them about the history of bread baking and yeast? And I said, why don't you talk about yeast in the Bible? And why were the Hebrew children told not to take anything with leaven in it? Yeast is leaven. When they got out of Egypt, and why unleavened bread is used in the New Testament at the Lord's Supper, and how the Bible used leavening as a figure of speech. A little leaven leavens the whole lump. And then show them a demonstration of how yeast work by putting some of it in warm water, and then show the breads of the world, because it's just so fascinating. Each country has, the Middle East has fascinating breads, and then places like France and Portugal have fascinating looking breads, and the South Americans and Mexicans have interesting breads. I have a book on bread, so I know all this. And then read from a book on breads. But basically, what is yeast? Where did it come from? How does it grow? What plants makes yeast? What all is yeast used for? So she has teaching evenings. I think it's wonderful, and I think you could do that even if your children were quite young. Something that they have learned, they can teach. And in the olden days, the older ones used to teach the younger ones. If we knew how to do something, we would teach someone else how to do it. So home life, well, if you're not used to being home and now you're home life will naturally settle into a pattern. It might take you a while to make note of it, but instead of saying, well, we're going to create a structure and we're going to make a bunch of rules, why don't you wait a little while and see how everyone kind of falls into place in the day. It starts in the morning. What do they do in the day? What do they do in the morning? Because some people have different teachable moments. And some people are more alert in the morning, some people do better in the afternoon. Just kind of have a look at how your family tends to act, and how they tend to work together, and then build your home life around that. And take note of when they seem to be the most hungry, the most discouraged, when they seem to be the most teachable, and prepare that afternoon tea like I mentioned there. So also, when your husband and children see the advantage of having you home and having you run the home and manage it and guide it and guard it. And one way I suggested that you guard the home, stay away from the media. They are going to discourage everyone. They're going to teach the opposite. And one of the reasons years ago I got into I became quite suspicious of the media is that a lot of the stories originated with them and not with people where things actually happened. Now, there were a couple of years ago when someone in our family had a terrible cold or flu that became a flu. It was a couple of years ago, and this child could barely get up out of bed and get into the car to get to the doctor to see what was wrong with him. And that was never in the news, and he was a terribly sick boy. And there were other people in the waiting room that were also sick with the same thing, but that never made the news. So one of the reasons that I question a lot of what I hear on the media is, first of all, it's designed to make you fear, it's designed to make you panic, and it's designed to make people buy certain things. Now, I went to town today, and of course, we're out here on the West Coast. Everything seems pretty normal around here. The traffic was actually quite thick, and people were around, and they were, getting normal stuff. And the things that we're missing were very interesting. Now, we're not missing things from our shelves because we have run out of things or because there's a dearth of something. And that's what people try to make it look like. They show these pictures of empty shelves and they say, oh, America's going down. Of course, they've been wanting America to go down forever, from since its inception. But it's because if people panic and they start stocking up all this stuff that they don't need because they think there's going to be a depression or something, then there's nothing left for other people to buy in a normal shopping expedition. But what I noticed was missing was very interesting because everybody's home now, So what I noticed was all the baking ingredients were the only thing left on the shelves were the mixes, cake mixes and cookie dough and things that were already prepared. But the basic ingredients like the flour and the oils and the butter and things like that were gone because, which I like because I think everybody's baking. Now, when I was growing up, we only ate food my mother made. So that when we moved to a place where we were able to go to a bakery or a deli, which we'd never tried before, and I think I was 16 before I ever went to a bakery or a deli and ate something made by someone else, and I didn't like it. I didn't like it. It tasted too sweet. It didn't taste wholesome. Had an aftertaste to it. But then I discovered when I took a French cooking course online, my mother, who was Canadian and was from the prairies of Alberta, had cooked like that all my life. I thought, oh, well, this is just like my mother used to cook. They brown things and then they roast them, and then the way they cut up potatoes and put them in ice water and then roll them in something, and then they brown them and then they roast them, and also the creams and the butters and the eggs and the things they did with them. My mother did all of that, and she did it with such ease, and I think it was just bred into her from her mother. And her mother was an orphan who came over on an orphan train called the Blue Nose from Nova Scotia, and she had quite a life. My mother had quite a life. I told you in a previous video that my mother, during the Depression, she was from a large family, and there were two younger girls, and it was my mother and her younger sister. And so a rich family came along and asked if they could adopt the two younger girls because everyone was so poor, and that they might starve. And so her mother let them go. And the girls cried so hard that after a week, the adoptive parents gave them back. And these girls, what were they crying for? They just missed their home. They missed their mother. I mean, they lived in squalor, and they lived with a dirt floor, which in those days a dirt floor wasn't what you think it is. It was very, very firmly packed, and it was swept, and it was shone, and everything. But they missed their family, and they didn't, even though they were in a home where they were getting a bed of their own, which, in those days, all these kids slept together, and they got a bed of their own with clean sheets and blankets, and they got new toys, and they got to go to a nice school. But the two girls were so unhappy, and they cried so hard for their parents that the adoptive parents took them back. And that's the kind of heritage I have. And so where was I? I was talking about cooking and about food and about your home and how to make, this is how you create your culture, is with your own recipes. And every home had different flavors. Then the cookbooks came out, and their food started tasting more alike. But I think it's really good to find out what your family eats and what they don't like. Don't serve them things that they don't like, and don't force them to eat things that they don't like. I mean, in the old days, we thought our parents and grandparents used to force us to eat things that we didn't like. And I think sometimes in little children, their taste buds aren't quite fully formed. They're not mature, and there's some things they won't like. Like I was probably in my 40s before I started to like certain types of foods. They were too strong for me. Your taste buds as children, very, very sensitive. That's one reason sometimes they don't like food mixed together, like in casseroles or salads. They'll eat a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but they don't like it all mixed up. And their taste buds are very, very sensitive. But as you get older, sometimes foods that you never liked taste better. So make home living pleasant and let them eat what they like, okay? And so now I have some things to say about the advantages that we have received by what is going on right now. And one of them is that everyone's home and they get to know each other. And they start to become more patient with each other because they're going to have to live together. So I think the best way to learn patience is to overlook an offense. Just overlook it. And by doing that, my children and I learned, that you didn't have to quarrel about every little thing. You just kind of moved on. You just kind of ignore it and move on, change the subject, whatever. But you don't, you always get these stinkers around that want to argue with every little thing. And not long ago, I said something about the tea being so good for you, any kind of tea, and that it helps keep you healthy. It flushes toxins out of your body. It's just so good for you. If you can look at the advantages of tea online, you'll find many, many people saying the same things, and even tea sites and official sites and some health practitioners saying it. And so I was reading this list to someone and suggesting, how important it is. And of course, she was an arguer, so she said, oh, well, not all the time. Well, it remains to be seen. Well, these are words that you need to learn to ignore. And so in conversation, when you get somebody like that, and they say something like that, don't go on trying to prove it. Just let it drop. Because you know in your own confidential self what is true, and you can just live it out. And you don't stop believing it just because they objected. So you can learn not to argue about every little thing. Okay, so now I want you to remember to start with two things with your family, and that's cleanliness and courtesy. And if there's just you home with your husband, cleanliness and courtesy. Those are the things that will help you live together in peace. Cleanliness and courtesy. And also, leaving a room better than when you got there, and always picking up after yourself, being thoughtful of the other person that's there and treating them as though they're more important. And you can overcome a lot of things. You can ignore a lot of things that people who like to argue say. And as I said, I've known people back in the olden days who lived with very grumpy husbands. And it's interesting to watch them when I was younger. They managed it by just going on with their own life. They just did whatever they had planned on doing. they would get supper at a certain time, and they wouldn't let these old cranky people throw them off. They just knew what time it was and what it was time to do. And I think we should take a lesson from the Victorians, because they had certain times of day that they did things. I was reading an old book how they like to, the ladies especially, like to get up in the morning and do call on people. And they'd take a little calling card and leave it to see if, with the maid, to see if they would be allowed to come in. And usually this little front room was reserved for callers, and people wouldn't stay long. They'd just call and say hello and leave a basket of food or bread or something like that. And so now that you're all home, you can do that. You can reserve the mornings for calling on people, and you can knock on the doors of the bedrooms, and you can leave them something. Another thing that you can do is mail. Now, they also knew about the mail, and the mail was delivered twice a day. Can you believe this? In Victorian times, it was delivered twice a day. That really kept people in business, didn't it? And you can make little pockets that out of the paper bag crafts, you can just cut a little square and glue it around and make a little pocket out of it, put a little handle on it, and hang it on the doorknobs of the rooms and put mail in it. And you can write to each other, and then you can check your mail in it. Oh my goodness, that'll keep people busy quite a bit of time during the day. The other things that the Victorians used to do is they had regular tea time, regular meal times. They had wash day, they had baking day, but they had moments. They had times during the day was pretty much divided into sections. They even had a time to sit and relax and read. And there were times when all they did was visit or do something with each other or read or sew, just different things that they like to do. So you can do that, but you have to kind of keep an eye on what it is, how your family is doing things, and capitalize on that. So now I have spoken for about 30 minutes, and if you'd like to go, I can. I'm going to talk a little bit about the economy in the Bible and why it's important to us as Christians, why we do care about the economy. You're finding in this day and age and in these stressful times, people will say, well, life is more than the economy. But if life is more than the economy, why is the economy so important? Do you enjoy having your shops closed? Do you enjoy not having products available to you? How noble does that feel? That is also demeaning to mankind. That also reduces people to, it reduces their dignity. And also the shortages of things that are personal, like the shortage of toilet paper. What did it do? It reduced everybody's conversation to talking about that product and about the toilet. And I think that's just, I don't know if that's deliberate or what, but when you see the fruits of this, the fruits of a failing economy or the fruits of business shutting down, can you say that it's good and that it's lovely and that it's true and that it's noble and that it's of good judgment? No. So if you think that the economy is not important, let me tell you biblically, if I had time, I'd take you from Genesis to Revelation, and in every book of the Bible show you something to do with the economy that God had his hand in and that he had commands about. For instance, he didn't like unjust weights and measures. You know how people would cheat other people by saying something costs more than it did, by weighing it and putting something else on the scale on one side to show that it weighed a lot more than it was and then charge more. God hated that. And so economy was very important, because that will destroy economy. Overcharging people will destroy economy. God hates it. And so let me just start a little bit of the Bible. I'll just mention a couple of things, okay? What do you think the Queen of Sheba admired Solomon for? Well, of course, she admired him for his wisdom, but she also admired him for the economy that he had created by being a good and wise king. And she said, your people are happy. That's what she said. Go and read about the Queen of Sheba. She said, how happy are your people? And how prosperous is everyone in your kingdom? So there was something going on there that had to do with the economy, which I think God is pleased with. He's commanded us to be happy. But how devious of an enemy to destroy an economy and make us unhappy when that is a sin against our God. And of course, they know how to do that, to make us involuntarily disobey what our Lord wants us to be. And so the Queen of Sheba admires Solomon for his accomplishments, but also how those accomplishments were achieved. And then why did Elkanah buy Hannah more gifts than anyone else in his family when they went to the one of the feasts? And this was the story of Samuel, if you'll remember. She wanted children so badly, and she finally had a little boy named Samuel. And Elkanah felt such tenderness towards her that he bought her more gifts than anyone else. Well, he bought them. That's part of the economy. And the products were there. That's part of economy, having products. There must have been a market to go to buy these things. These were mentioned in the Bible. And so all through the Bible is mentioned the economy. Why was Israel supposed to give 10% of their prosperity to as a contribution? Why in the New Testament are we to give as we have prospered? We don't give exactly 10%. We give as we have prospered, whatever a man has prospered and purposed in his heart. So we actually give more than 10%. You'll find that most people in the Lord's church give more than 10%. But why were we told to give money? Why were we told to give anything that has to do with economy? Because we can help poor people. We can help sick people. We can support the ministers and the missionaries. But if you don't have money, you can't help anybody. And if your shops aren't open, you can't care for people. And so it's getting to where people are, I don't know, there's this socialism and communism that goes on. And we were taught to hate communism, hate socialism, because we had heard that it caused long lines, that it caused distribution of things, or what's that called, when they only let you have, a certain amount. I forget what it, goodness, I used to know what that word was, but they would allocate only a certain amount. If you know the word, please leave it in the comments. I should know it. But they would allocate a certain amount per everyone. And when I was growing up, I was so wide-eyed about that. I can't imagine only being given one, one something per person, because we could go and get all we wanted. And we had a large family and we needed a lot, but it was rationing is what it was called. And we had heard that this kind of life caused rationing. It caused long lines. It caused personal misery. It caused people not to be able to live their ambitions and dreams. And that's what the pursuit of happiness was in the Declaration of Independence. It didn't mean pleasure. It just meant the pursuit of happiness. Happiness referred to a person pursuing their goals and dreams in work and in business and in developing themselves and developing the world. That's what the pursuit of happiness was. And so, because it wasn't what we think of today as just, we're smiling a lot and we're happy. So there went a lot deeper than that. So if the economy doesn't mean anything to God, and if life is more than economy, well, then life is more than other things too. Life is actually more than illness. It's more than death. It's more than many things. So don't let people bamboozle you with that phrase. And one thing I've noticed about this, and if some of you don't want to listen to this, you may go on, but I am going to end on a happy note, don't worry. If life is more than economy, then why is it mentioned so often? And in the New Testament, it talks about how the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And you will find that sometimes behind all this effort to close down business, to close down the economy, is the love of money, the people who want to rob the nation of money and to keep it and not circulate it. And so it was also talks about the covetous man. And so I had a book here. I don't know if I've got it here or not. Um, and it was called Government and Economics in Christian Perspective. If you want to get online and look for that, it was a student book in homeschooling. And it was really interesting on how money was created by God but it could be used for ill, good or ill, and how to, well, anything can, you know. You can have a talent, you can have something good, anything can be used for good or ill. And so money in this and the economy on how it's supposed to go. And I learned a lot from it, but I learned more from just trying to see it in the Bible. And it's interesting about this current situation and any situation that comes on that they never put restrictions on people that smoke or drink. No one says in order to keep from getting sick, you should stop smoking and drinking. That no one ever says that. No one ever says that. And so, but they always, I'll tell you what, some of these powers that be, some of these government powers that be that put restrictions on people are narcissists. And I will tell you a little bit about narcissism. I've studied it a little bit. A narcissist will find out what people enjoy, what they like, how they're progressing in life, and do everything they can to stop them. So if they find out you like a favorite food or drink or something like that, they will find a way that you can't get it. If they find out that you like to sit down and read a book at night, they'll hide your book. Or they'll cause a disturbance in the house so that you can't relax. If they find out that you want to be a happily married woman with children and a happy home and a nice cozy home and with, you know, fairly decent furniture and a working kitchen and everything as good as it can be, they will find a way to prevent you from getting it. That is a narcissist. Well, that's what some of these deep state players are doing. They're narcissists. If you find out, if for years and years and years you've gotten used to something, let's say you've gotten used to heat, light, and water, they'll figure out a way to shut off one of it, and you have to, and the adjustment is so tremendous that it actually will put you in a state of shock. And this is what it's like with us, with our businesses. They shut down a business, and everyone has to go into a state of adjustment and a state of shock, which is totally unnecessary. And now, however, as Christians, we can overcome it, and we can circumvent it, and we can ride over it, and we can come out even better. However, it's not something that I don't think it's very nice to do that to people, and it's unnecessary. In fact, I have heard in some countries that they're not allowed to visit their aged parents, and not just the parents that are in retirement centers, but parents who are just in their own homes, that people are not allowed to, relatives are not allowed to visit them because they're older and they're at risk. And so they don't want us talking to each other, because the only thing they want us doing is using our internet and our phones, because all that can be tracked, all that can be traced. But in our, going outside and being with people and talking to them, they can't monitor all of it, and they don't want us talking to each other except when on, on electronics. So that to me is not right. And this is a cruelty that's being forced on people, and it takes away anything that helps you and anything that you like. And it's also will turn you into a third world country with nothing but the very, very basics. Even that can be taken away from you. And any comfort that we have, a narcissist will take away any comfort that you have. I heard about a lady whose husband wasn't kind of a narcissist, just kind of a unreasonable person, and she wanted to paint her house, and he found out all kinds of different ways why she couldn't paint it. First, he didn't like the paint, something wrong with the paint. Then he didn't want to take the time to do it, and then there was something else, and then there was something else, and finally she decided to paint it herself. And he figured out he didn't have enough money for the rest of the paint, or if he went and got her paint, it wasn't quite matching. But narcissists will mess up life for you, and that's what this deep state government is doing. They're just a bunch of narcissists, and they like to mess everything up. They never suffer, though. They've got mansions that are paid for. They've got servants. They've got everything they need. They don't care about the rest of us. And that's why it's so wicked. And so the more you free yourself of the media, the happier you're going to be. Now, I mentioned several places you could go if you really felt you needed to know what's going on, is the Ron Paul videos and the Amazing Polly videos, and there might be a few others that you can find, because they give you a better perspective. And the media, my big beef with them is they are always the source of some of these stories, almost like they produced it. Now, I know how to stage something because behind me you see neat and tidiness, but in front of me you don't, because I'm only showing you what I want you to see. They can create any kind of a disaster they want to on film and on with pictures. And some people have been able to pick all these apart and show where they're not real, but they keep you in a constant state of unsettledness and being upset, and that's not normal. That's not right. In fact, God has told us not to worry, and what they're doing is causing us to sin against our God and to sin against our Lord Christ. And see how clever that is. The one thing that's standing between us and a takeover of dictatorship, socialism, and communism is our God. So now, shutting down churches, and of course, they do worship online, but of course that can all be peeked in on and spied on. Good for them. But still, you know, it takes away your privacy, and also we can't fellowship the way that God wants us to. So that's why I'm so suspicious of it all. And you know, they're also saying in some of these other countries that no weddings are allowed. Isn't that sad? No weddings are allowed. Now, some people say, well, they think that matters because people weren't getting married anyway. They're just living together. But there were people that are getting married. And if you'll go to the bookstore and look at, or the grocery store, they have a little magazine rack in most stores. Walmart has them, the little rack magazine area. And there are lots of wedding magazines showing venues and clothing and food and just things that help plan a wedding. So that they are promoting weddings. And that is another part of our free enterprise. And so people are getting married, but to forbid them to get married reminds me of what is it, 1 Timothy, was it chapter 4? In the last days some shall depart from the faith, having their conscience seared with a hot iron, forbidding to marry. And these people that are doing that, not good. So ladies, I've got a little bit more to go, and I want to, because I had to say that. But the more you free yourself of the media, the happier you'll be, and you'll be very glad that you used this time, productively. I think there are going to be a lot of blogs, a lot of YouTube videos where people are showing things that they have done at home to make it a better place. And so some of the things that were missing when I went to Walmart, I have to tell you, kind of gives us a clue of what people are doing. I told you the baking stuff was missing. The sewing machines were gone, so they're sewing. And the paint was down a little low. So they must be painting the inside of their houses, making them nicer to live in. And the bicycles were gone. But of course, you got to realize there was a sudden rush to get all these things, whereas a lot of people would have just casually gone in and got one when they needed one. But our supply chain is working very well. We're not out of these things. These things are being produced in our country. Our factories are producing things, and people are making things and selling things. But the trucks only come on a schedule. And if you raid the shops before the trucks come in, of course, they're going to look empty. And but I just thought it was encouraging, because I look out the window here. I live in farm country, and there's a farm road going past. Whole families riding bicycles in front of me. And even when I was downtown, there were people riding bicycles, and a lot of people walking together, and you know, in groups. And basically in farm country, you can't really control these people. It's like trying to herd cats. You know? Farmers just do what they want. And so in leaving you today, I hate to say goodbye, but the clock on the clubhouse wall says it's time to go. So I want to leave you with some things to go. And I'm going to say it in my best Dr. Gibson, because I listen to Wives and Daughters all the time, in my best Dr. Gibson voice. And don't you remember when he was listening to the heartbeat of Lady Cumnor, And he said, try to get out and walk a little bit. No more rich food. And she said, it's so nice to have someone tell me what to do instead of always telling other people what to do. So she really appreciated the doctor. But he said, try to walk a little bit. Try to get out in the fresh air. So here's what I'm going to say in my best Dr. Gibson voice, because he told her no more rich food. Try to pray a little more and walk a little bit outside. Floss your teeth. Sing, write, sew and craft. Exercise. Stop and thank the Lord for everything. And drink hot tea all day long. So ladies, I love you. Please leave a, you're not leaving comments. If you're afraid you're going to be traced or something like that, I think you can post as anonymous, but I don't put anonymous on there because that's when the spam starts coming. So you can email me, and on the left side of my blog, I hope you're watching this on my blog. I left a link in the description box. I'd like you to go over there and listen to this. On the left-hand side, there is a continuous play of all these videos of homemaking radio, and there is also a little button, and you can email me, or you can paste it and email me, and I'll put it on so that it doesn't have your name on it. Just tell me what you want to write. And also my donate button is there. If you've got $1, they don't accept $1, but if I could get $1 from everyone, I can. I also, because of your sweet sacrificial donations, I know most people give just a little more than $5, but I did buy the last sewing machine I saw at Walmart because I needed it so bad, and I'm sewing beautiful clothes. I would just like to show you one thing that I'm sewing for my granddaughter. She loves prairie dresses, and I include one of Miss Lily of the Valleys little stories, one of her books in each one. And this one, this is a prairie dress. I always line them. I prefer lining better than facings. All you do to make a lining is just cut out another bodice and back and sew it together. And so I bought a bolt of this fabric, and I bought a new sewing machine, and I'm busy. I'll show you a picture of this before I send it, and we'll do a boxing instead of an unboxing. And I'll show you what I put in her box, and Miss Lily is going to send her, include a story for her, and the story is called Prairie Roses, because on the prairie land between Missouri and Oregon there are roses, little prairie roses that grow in the ground, and there are many delightful things on the prairie and in the desert, and the desert is full of riches, and there's a different kind of beauty everywhere. Even land that seemed barren has a special kind of loveliness. So ladies, I love you, and I'll talk to you next time. Please leave me a comment. Bye.